right, so we ended the last video with an introduction to retrovirus, and we ended with the common cold. So, a retrovirus. In contrast to the cold virus, HIV makes a DNA copy of itself that inserts into the host DNA. There, it may remain active for many cell cycles. So, let's kind of talk about this right quick. The deadly disease that we call AIDS is actually called acquired immune deficiency syndrome. That is where we get each of the letters from for AIDS. A is for acquired, I is for immune, D is for deficiency, and S is for syndrome. This is caused by an RNA virus called HIV, which we called human immunodeficiency virus. So before we go on, just to make sure people understand, you cannot catch AIDS. AIDS is something that is caused by a virus. So HIV belongs to a group of RNA viruses that are called retroviruses. The genetic information of a retrovirus is copied from RNA to DNA instead of DNA to RNA. We've talked about in the past, DNA makes RNA, makes proteins. We transcribe, we translate it, and DNA makes RNA, makes proteins. However, if this virus is going RNA to DNA, that means it's going backwards. So let's kind of go through the process of an HIV infection. So when a retrovirus infects a cell, it makes a DNA copy of its RNA. You can see that here in the first area. So a DNA copy of the viral RNA is made. This is what we have here. So the viral DNA is inserted into the host cell. That means the viral DNA is going to be put inside of the host cell. The copy, if you see the picture here, is inserted into the host genome. We know genome, anytime we see genome, or anytime we see gene in front of it, we automatically start to think, wait, genetics. What does genetics have to deal with? Oh, that has to deal with DNA and RNA. Just so I'm checking myself and remembering what it goes with, DNA and RNA are both nucleic acids. Nucleic acids is one of my 4 biomolecules. So as we're understanding some of these things, let's also connect the dots and understand where it's coming from and why something is happening. So we understand that here, DNA copy of viral DNA is made, and the copy is inserted into the host genome. So a retroviral infection, these are similar to lysogenic infections of bacteria. Kind of like a prophage, which is one of your vocabulary words, in a bacterial host. The viral DNA, it might remain inactive for many cell cycles before making new virus particles and damaging the cells of the host immune system. Eventually, the DNA is transcribed. When I say transcribed, I mean like it's recorded or it's copied out. So eventually that DNA is transcribed and new viral parts are made. So let's look at that in the photo. So now we're at step 3. It is later transcribed and translated into new viral parts. Once activated, the viruses leave the cell and begin to destroy the very system of the body that would normally fight infections. So let's see on here. These are the parts. the parts assemble into new viruses and burst from the host cell. So, if we quickly review this, a DNA copy of the viral RNA is made. You see your RNA and it's making a copy for DNA that is then inserted into the host genome, meaning it's inserted into its genetics or its genetic code. From there, it is later transcribed and translated into new viral parts, and then those parts assemble into new viruses and bust right through the host cell. All right, so understand the word retro means backwards. So let's ask a question. Let's kind of check for understanding of what we're talking about here. Why is the word retrovirus used to describe HIV? Think about that for a second. Think about how I just explained it goes from how it normally goes with DNA makes RNA makes proteins, but this one is actually doing something different. The genetic information of a retrovirus, like HIV, it's being copied from RNA to DNA instead of DNA to RNA, which is the proper way. Therefore, it's backwards. The virus is completing these steps backwards because DNA makes RNA makes proteins, but not in a retrovirus. A retrovirus is going RNA to DNA. That is why we describe it as a retrovirus. All right, let's check for another. So, if the virus that causes the common cold is also an RNA virus, why is it not called a retrovirus? So let's go back. Here we go. Here's your code slide. On the slide for the code, you have the virus makes many copies of RNA. The copies are translated by the host into new viral parts. The parts assemble into new viruses and burst from the host cell. There's nothing in here that states that it's actually making a backwards path or process. So, in an infected cell with the common cold virus, RNA is not copied to make DNA. Instead, the viral RNA is translated, or you can look at it as decoded, by the cell's ribosomes to produce viral proteins. So it does not go backwards, therefore it cannot be called a retrovirus. Now, let's compare and contrast the HIV infection mechanism with the common cold mechanism. So, the common cold mechanism. Once the cold virus has penetrated the host cell, it uses the host cellular machinery to replicate itself, and quickly. It's fast acting. It does not remain inactive. It wants to get in there and do its job. When we talk about, let's move to the next slide. Boom, boom, and boom. When we talk about the retrovirus, this retrovirus is not as fast acting. The retrovirus, such as HIV, is what we're using as our example. It makes a DNA copy of the RNA, and then it inserts itself into the host DNA, and there it can remain inactive for many cycles. So that is how we could compare and contrast the mechanisms of these two different viruses. All right, let's move on to human viral diseases. We have a few common human viral diseases. Let's kind of go through these. So, like bacteria, viruses produce disease by disrupting the body's normal homeostasis. This word homeostasis should sound familiar to you. it was one of your vocabulary words this semester. This definition that was given in your textbook is a state of relatively constant internal physical and chemical conditions. So let's kind of think of it as let's keep the body in balance. Let's keep the cells in balance. If anything disrupts that balance, it disrupts your homeostasis. So, how do viruses cause disease? Viruses cause disease by directly destroying living cells or by affecting cellular processes in ways that upset homeostasis. So let's direct ourselves and review the table, which lists some of the common human diseases caused by viruses. If we look here, we have the common cold. This list, or let's go with technical terms, this column has disease. This column has your effects on the body, and this column has your different forms of transmission. These going across are rows. So rows are horizontal. This row is talking about the common cold. This row is going through influenza. This row goes through AIDS. This row goes through hepatitis B. This row goes through West Nile virus. This row goes through Ebola. And this row goes through Zika. So, we're going to evaluate all of the different diseases and the effects and transmission in just 1 second. Well, let's do it on the next video. And let's just kind of make sure that we can find what we're looking for. Do we know how to search for what is being asked of us? So let's do a quick question. Which virus comes from the bite of an infected mosquito? I'll give you about 10 seconds to find that. Okay, so it's asking about which virus comes from. So it's saying, where does it come from? That has to do with transmission. How is it transmitted? The virus that comes from the bite of an infected mosquito can be, it can be West Nile virus. You also see that a bite from an infected mosquito can be, I'm sorry, that said Zika. It's Zika virus. This one could also be West Nile virus because this is also a form of transmission. Viruses produce serious animal and plant diseases as well. Let's go ahead and jump on the next video and thoroughly go through these charts.